Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in April, and I also will be combining. I did a poll on my YouTube page asking if you wanted me to combine TBRs and like wrap-ups into one, so that is what I will be doing today. So I'll also be talking about the books that I plan on reading in the month of May. So let me know if you like this format and if you want me to do things a little bit differently. Just keep me posted and let me know, but I think this will be a little bit easier. I'll be posting a life update a week from when this video comes out, so I'll kind of talk more about not only major life updates but also channel updates as well. So I'll hopefully that video will answer all your questions. But yeah, if you guys haven't seen, I posted on Instagram that I successfully defended my PhD, so I'm officially a doctor now, and I feel so much relief. So despite that being such a major stressor, I feel like for the first few weeks I didn't really read much. One of them was an audiobook, so I just kind of listened to it when I was driving to school, and the other one I just kind of read sporadically. But I read a total of 7 books. So after my PhD I read 5 books, and so I feel I've gotten into reading again. I felt like I was in a bit of a reading slump. I think I was just so emotionally and mentally tired from everything that it was just I was falling asleep reading after 5 pages. So I'm happy to kind of be back into reading again, which is always exciting. So I have books here that are kind of, part of them are I will say 5 of them are a part of the same series slash world, and I read through them very quickly obviously, and then the other 2, we have a nonfiction and then historical fiction. So without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, so I just lowered the camera a little bit because my posture is not good enough to sit up that straight for this long. So let's move on to book number 1, which was an audiobook that I listened to, and it was called Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. And this book talks about how kind of mainstream feminism is focused more on the middle class white woman, but it leaves behind a lot of issues that are common in marginalized groups, and how if we learn to integrate these kind of marginalized issues into mainstream feminism, we'll be able to not only help women but also society as a whole. So it talks about education, gun violence, all these other things, and I learned so much. I think this is a book that everyone needs to read. I think it's very informative, and there are many ways that you can integrate what the author is kind of talking about into your everyday life, and it makes you more conscientious of kind of the racism that is a part of white feminism, and it allows you to kind of see how, again, you can integrate it into your life. So this book was really interesting. I do think the audiobook is the way to go. I find with nonfiction, I prefer the audiobook over reading this. I'm sure I would have liked this too, but I think the audiobook is just, for me at least, an easier way to kind of consume this type of literature. And yeah, it was just really interesting. So it's medical care, gun violence, safe neighborhoods, abortion care, all these other things that should be feminist issues and that feminism should strive to address are kind of left behind because they don't primarily impact white females, middle class females. So it's just really informative. I learned so much, and like I said, I feel like having read this, I feel like I can integrate a lot more feminist ideas and more inclusive feminism into my everyday life. So again, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was very insightful and informative, and I think it's, again, a book everyone needs to read. So next I ended up picking up Stateless by Wein. This is her newest book that came out, and I was so excited. She hasn't had a book come out for several years, so I think this is the first time since even before COVID that she has a new book come out, and I really love this. So the premise of the story is we follow Stella North, who is a female pilot who is representing England during this flight competition in 1937 that is used to kind of promote peace piece within Europe, and so there are pilots from other different countries that are competing with this, but obviously we know with hindsight that this is a very pivotal point kind of leading up to the progression of World War II being declared in 1939. And so when Stella's on this flight, she ends up kind of witnessing another pilot kind of murder another one, and they crash into the English Channel. And so she's very suspicious and highly concerned with what is going on, and so it leads to this other kind of unraveling of this mystery of what is occurring. There's instances of sabotage going on, and it kind of goes from there. I really enjoyed this. I think Elizabeth Wein is a pilot, so a lot of her books integrate a lot of kind of plain stuff in here, and I think it's just really interesting to learn the mechanics of it. As like an engineer, I do really enjoy that, and I just really enjoyed this. It was kind of a game of, it was like a murder mystery type weaved in with a like cat and mouse suspense, trying to figure out what was going on. I will say it was very easy to figure out who the villain was in this one, just given the setting and the characters involved. But other than that, I really enjoyed like reading this and figuring out why this character was doing these things and like sabotaging and resulting to murder, when this is a kind of race to promote peace in Europe. And I really loved it. Like I said, it was really interesting, and given the kind of what we know with like the historical like hindsight, you kind of feel a sense of dread too, where you know these like what's in store for these young pilots in a few years, and so you kind of get that sense of dread that you know what's in store for them, even though they're very hopeful and promoting peace. And yeah, I really liked it. It kind of had an open ending too, so I don't know if there will be like another one within this kind of cast of characters, but I really enjoyed this. It was, if you like kind of high, like I want it not like action packed, but you like suspenseful cat and mouse spy movies, like where it's like you know something is going on, and you like historical fiction, I think you will really like this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this, and I was happy to have a new Elizabeth Wein book in my hand. So next we are moving on to the fantasy series slash world that I just marathon through for after I finished my dissertation. Like, I flew through these books. Like, my brain was firing on all cylinders. The hamster wheel was on full speed. Like, we were reaching our true brain cell capacity, so which was really nice. Life is just so much more enjoyable when you're not so stressed out all the time, and so my way to kind of decompress after everything was to enjoy some reading. So I ended up reading the entirety of the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, and I'm sure you guys already know about this trilogy, but I was wanting something, like, for me, my guilty pleasure is like the Sarah J Maas books, and although this is kind of a toned down, less steamy version of that, I was like, this is just like my guilty pleasure, and I loved it. Obviously, I marathoned all 3 books, but it follows Jude, who was captured from the human world and brought to the Fae world, and she kind of grows up within the Fae world, having already experienced the human world, and she despises the Fae, not only because her adopted father murdered her parents, but they're just cruel, and so she has like, she wants to kind of somewhat get revenge, and it kind of goes off from there. And yeah, I loved it. I think the second book was definitely my favorite. I gave them all, I'm looking at my notes here, I gave them all 4 out of 5 stars. I will say that the Cruel Prince, the first part of the book was slow. I think it was kind of establishing the world and the characters and the character dynamics and their motivations, but the second half of the book was just wild. I was like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming, and it just, like, I enjoyed it. I know for the third book in particular, The Queen of Nothing, people were wanting something different, and I really enjoyed like this book overall. I feel like it was a good conclusion. I know, like, if we're used to Sarah J Maas, there's like this epic battle at the end, and this one was a little bit more subtle, but I felt like it was a good conclusion overall. And yeah, definitely has become some of my favorite kind of YA fantasy series. But like I said, I marathoned through this. It's not like Sarah J Maas, but I think if you like fae stuff and want something a little bit, it's like violent, but it's not, you know, graphic in other senses and other aspects. So yeah, the one thing I will say though is that I don't find like the romance between Jude, who's the main character, and the prince to be very convincing. Like I don't really get, like, I don't really enjoy tropes that have, like, in terms of like the relationship, one person's like really mean to the other, and I just didn't feel that chemistry that a lot of people kind of go crazy for. Like I just didn't really feel that chemistry. That was like, I feel like, my one complaint. But yeah, overall I loved this. It was a lot of fun. Clearly I marathoned this and just absolutely loved it. It's not perfect, but it was enjoyable. And then after that, I ended up picking up The Stolen Heir, which is kind of a spin-off book. I think it takes place 7 years after the events of the last book in the trilogy, and we follow two characters that are mentioned in here, but they don't play a significant role. And I think I like this more than the original trilogy. It was just a lot of fun. I feel like there's a lot more action. There's a lot of more scheming, especially like kind of the relationship that forms in here. I felt it to be much more believable, and I was just deeply invested in it. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I just can't wait to see what happens next. I will say kind of the big plot twist at the end, like you can see from like 10,000 miles away. It was very obvious, but despite that, I still really enjoyed it. I think Surin, or like Ren, and Oak as characters are really interesting, and they both have very dark like backgrounds and backstories that I really like seeing their friendship and their mistrust that they have for each other grow and develop over the course of the novel. And you can just tell this duology is building towards something, and I just can't wait for the next one. This one I gave 5 out of 5 stars, despite some things being very obvious. Like, I was just deeply invested in this. I read it so quickly. I loved it so much. It was just, I really just love these characters. I really love how like the mystery of things unraveled, figuring out what is going on. And yeah, I just can't, that ending, I'm very excited. I was not expecting kind of how things ended, even though the plot twist, but like how things ended, I was not expecting it. It took me by surprise, but man, did I love it. It was so good. So yeah, like I said, deeply invested and obsessed with this series. And lastly, to finish out my month of reading and to finish out my like marathon through the Folk of the Air series, and I read the short story or like novella for How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. And this is a novella following Prince Cardan and his like upbringing and like other things throughout his life over the course of the trilogy. It is interesting because you, especially from the original Folk of the Air trilogy, it's told through Jude's perspective. So she's either told these things that Cardan is doing, or, you know, she finds out about them somehow. So you don't actually see them play out on the page. And so these things, even though these are some of the things that we know are like happening or have happened, we get to see them from Cardan's perspective as it was going on. It, like, I did enjoy it. I don't think it's a very like a necessary novella. Like, it wasn't mind-blowing or anything. It was enjoyable, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think I'll definitely get like the paperback once it comes out to add to my collection. Like, I did enjoy it, but it kind of provides more background to Cardan and his motivations throughout the trilogy and like what is going on, because we're, like I said, we're only kind of getting Jude's perspective. So I like getting his perspective in some of these key pivotal moments. There are some short stories that I liked better than others, but overall it was just a fun way to kind of conclude out my marathon of the series, and I can't wait for the next book to come out. I think it's in February, so I'm just counting down the days for that. But I really enjoyed it. So as you can see, I read a lot of good books over April, and going into May, I do want to keep the momentum going with reading. There's some books that I just didn't get to that were new releases that came out in April that I want to get to this month. And I'm going to be doing a separate TBR video for books I'll be bringing on vacation with me. And so for, I think like a week and a half, my boyfriend and I will be in Quebec. So I'm going to be bringing some of these books with me, and some other books that I'm not talking about in this one. So keep your eyes peeled for that video. But in the meantime, these are like the core books that make up the ones that I want to get to this month. I feel like at least one of these will have to come with me when I go to Quebec. But yeah, still hopeful. So the first book is one that I'm currently reading. I did get it from the library. Actually, let me double check. Okay, it's due the 11th, so I still have time. I think that's, yeah, next Thursday I have to get this done, and it is the 3rd today, so I can get this done. And it is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is her newest book that came out towards the end of April, and like I said, I wanted to get this one from the library. I feel like Emily Henry, I either like enjoy her books, but they haven't been like mind-blowing as everyone says they are. But this one I'm definitely enjoying a lot more. So we follow Harriet, who every year since she became friends with her roommates in university, she's been going to one of her friends' like lake house for a week, and we kind of go from there. But she ends up, her ex-fiance is invited to the last kind of beach house vacation stay ever, and so they didn't tell their friends that they were no longer, like, they called off the engagement, so they have to kind of keep up this facade of them still being together. And that's where I'm kind of at right now, where everything's kind of been set, and you get flashbacks of Harriet and Wein, I think that's his name. Yeah, Wein. Wein. When they start, like, they first met, how they, like, you know, fell in love, all these things, and kind of where they are now. Like I said, I'm only like 40 pages into this one, but I am really liking it so far. This is, I feel like, one that I'm liking a little bit more. So I'm gonna make a prediction. I'm gonna be bold and say I'm gonna first, I think my ranking in terms of how I like the Emily Henry books, it's gonna be Happy Place. I'm being bold. Happy Place, Book Lovers, People We Meet on Vacation, and Beach Reads. So we shall see. But I think it's just fun. Like, it's just like a cute little rom-com to read. I think these are just kind of fun, and yeah, they're just easy reads. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm being bold. This might be my favorite Emily Henry book, but we'll see if that prediction holds true. So next, these are the books that came out last month that I didn't get around to read to because, like I said, I was deeply invested in the Folk of the Air world. The first of which is The Golden Doves by Martha Hall Kelly, and this follows two women who worked with the French resistance during World War II, and they ultimately end up getting sent to Ravensbrück. And so we follow these women, I assume, during their French resistance and Ravensbrück days, and then we also follow them kind of post-war, where a decade later, the Doves fall headlong into a dangerous dual mission. Josie is working for U.S. Army intelligence and accepts an assignment to hunt down the infamous doctor that tested on them at Ravensbrück, and a mysterious man tells Arlette that he may have found her son. And so it kind of goes off from there. I love Martha Hall Kelly. I adore her Faraday family books. I love that trilogy. It's so good, and so I can't wait to dive into this one. Like I said, I would have devoured this if I wasn't reading The Folk of the Air, but yeah, I'm excited to pick this one up. And then the next one is Homecoming by Kate Morton. Again, this is another one that came out earlier last month, and I even splurged and got the signed one because Kate Morton is one of my favorite authors. But this one follows this family that was massacred on Christmas Day. Christmas Eve 1959, and the murder of this family was never truly resolved. And so we flash forward to present day, where we're following this young woman journalist named Jess who has lost her job. She's very much struggling with finding her place in the world, so she goes back to visit her family in Australia, where she learns more about this unsolved family murder, and it kind of goes from there. Kate Morton does a really tremendous job at weaving in these past and present storylines where you're kind of figuring it out with the characters, and I'm just really excited. Again, she hasn't had a book released since maybe 2018, 2019, so it's been a while, and I just can't wait to dive right in. Again, Martha Hall Kelly and Kate Morton are some of my favorite authors, so I have a lot of exciting new releases to look forward to this month. And lastly, my friend and I have finished our kind of marathon through the Grishaverse. So we read the original Grisha trilogy, we read the Six of Crows duology, but I think there's going to be a new one coming out soon. I don't know. It says so on Goodreads, but no date announced. And so next we're going to pick up the Nikolai duology, which the first one is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I read this a long time ago when it first came out, and I didn't have like a good refresh of the original like Grisha books that have already been established, so I was very confused. So I only have read this one, but I think it'll be good to kind of reread this, kind of having more of the Grishaverse stuff fresh in my mind. But this follows Nikolai after the events of the original trilogy, where he has become king and the struggles that he has following that. So again, like I said, I read this, but I don't remember too much about it, and I will remember who these characters are now, because I was like, I don't even remember who Zoya is, but now I remember. So yeah, I'll be excited to kind of marathon this book and then the sequel, which I have not read. So it will be fun to kind of revisit this the Grisha first, and kind of, you know, see these characters again in a way, hopefully, where I have more background in my mind to kind of remember what is going on. So I think it will be good, but it will be fun to kind of buddy read this with my friend. And this was a funny thing too. I got this at Half Price Books, and it ended up being a signed book, which I had no idea. So it was a fun find. It was like in their new like section too, so I don't know if they didn't realize it was a signed book, or I just got lucky. But yes, I will be definitely finishing this duology probably within like either May or June. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books you read this month were, and all that fun stuff, and which books you plan on reading in May. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.